My husband's family called me a disgrace at my husband's niece's ballet recital 20 minutes later. The principal took the mic and said, "Tonight's performance was sponsored by this incredible woman right here." I turned, and they couldn't hide their shock. I met Joel in a coffee shop during a rainstorm. One of those poetic, he offered me a dry seat stories that sounds fake but isn't. We talked for 3 hours. I'd just started working in nonprofit financial consulting. He was in urban planning. It felt like fate. We moved in together after 10 months, married after 2 years. At first, everything felt right. His parents were traditional, but I thought I could win them over. His sisters seemed a little standoffish, but I chalked it up to me being new. Looking back, the red flags were more like full parades. Joel's mom Delphine made it clear early on that I wasn't what she pictured for her son. I didn't grow up in church. I didn't bake. I didn't fawn over Joel the way his sisters did. I was just me. Professional, quiet, kind. Not dramatic. Not flashy. But apparently not good enough. Every family event became a minefield. Celeste, the oldest sister, always found a way to correct me. About everything. One time, I brought salad to a 4th of July barbecue and she said, "Oh. Store-bought. That's fine. We usually make our own dressing but, okay." Myra, the younger one, liked to stir the pot. She'd ask me loaded questions about when Joel and I planned to have kids, even after I miscarried at 7 weeks and begged for privacy. Then she'd smirk when I walked away. Joel said they were just old school. "They don't mean it that way," he'd say. "They're just stuck in their ways." So I let it go. Again. And again. And again. But I kept track. Not on paper. Just in memory. The kind that builds like sediment. The birthday parties where they'd forget to include my name on the cake. The family trips I wasn't told about until after they happened. The holidays where my gifts were unwrapped last, or not at all. Joel knew. He always knew. But he never once defended me. When Sienna got the lead in her school's ballet performance, I was genuinely happy for her. She was 10, full of joy and natural grace. She'd once said I was her cool aunt because I let her wear glitter nail polish and taught her how to balance a budget with Monopoly money. That little girl had no idea how her mom and grandma talked about me behind my back. The recital was being held at the Diana Wortham Theater downtown, a gorgeous venue with soft lights and rows of deep blue chairs. I dressed in a soft navy pantsuit and brought tulips for Sienna, her favorite. I arrived early but didn't go sit with Joel's family. I hung around the lobby, sipping lemon water, waiting for the second act when Sienna would perform. When I finally went in and sat next to Joel, I thought maybe, just maybe, tonight would be different. I was wrong. Their whispers didn't stop. Delphine talked about how classless I looked. Myra said I probably bought the flowers last minute because she always forgets. Celeste said I must have begged for a ticket because no one actually invites her. And Joel. Joel sat there, staring ahead. Silent. I didn't cry. I didn't get up. I just let the words wash over me. But inside, something shifted. I picked up my purse, left the tulips on the seat, and walked out into the lobby. I wasn't running. I wasn't even angry. I just needed air, and my phone. Because what Joel's family didn't know was that I was the reason this recital was even happening. 6 months earlier, the principal of the school, Mr. Banning, reached out to a professional nonprofit network I'm part of. Their funding had been slashed. The ballet program, art classes, the spring performance, all on the chopping block. I worked behind the scenes, quietly, with a few colleagues to help them secure a grant. I didn't want credit. I didn't even tell Joel. I just wanted to help. And now, standing in that lobby, I realized maybe I'd done more than help. Maybe I'd finally given myself something his family never would, power. I pulled up the grant acceptance email and forwarded it to Mr. Banning with a short message. If you want to acknowledge the donor tonight, I'm here. Row F, seat 27. Then I went back inside, just as the lights dimmed. The music started again. A hush fell over the audience, that gentle kind of silence that always follows a shift in the mood of a performance. Sienna's solo was part of the final act, and the lights dimmed to a soft, romantic blue as she stepped onto the stage. She looked so small standing there, barely up to the shoulder of the older dancers. But she moved like the music lived in her bones. There was something ethereal about her presence, and despite everything happening in my chest, I couldn't stop the way my heart ached with pride. Delphine leaned over to Celeste during the middle of the performance and whispered something. I didn't even try to catch the words this time. It didn't matter. Whatever cruel commentary they had, whatever small way they tried to shrink me, it was about to be swallowed whole by the truth. As the final sequence of Sienna's solo closed, she struck her final pose under the spotlight. The music faded out. The applause grew loud and steady. I clapped too. Not just for her performance, but for the little girl who didn't yet know how cruel adults could be. I clapped for the hope that maybe, just maybe, she'd grow up different from them. As the curtains began to close, I noticed a few people from the staff setting up a microphone on stage. One of them, a young assistant with a clipboard, darted off toward the side curtain and returned with Principal Banning. The audience quieted again. The principal looked down at a note in his hand. Then he looked out at the audience with a smile that felt specific. If I could have just one more moment of your attention, he said, holding the microphone gently, I'd like to share something very important before we close tonight's program. Delphine sighed, audibly. Honestly, who needs a speech? Joel's knee bounced beside me, subtle but constant. Maybe he felt something was coming. Maybe he could feel the shift in the air. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just listened. This year, Principal Banning began, our performing arts department faced severe budget cuts. It looked, for a time, like our spring recital would have to be cancelled. Our students worked so hard, and we couldn't bear to let their talent go unseen. You could feel the tension begin to build in the room. Parents glanced at each other. Teachers nodded softly. But, he continued, we were incredibly fortunate to receive help. Quiet help. The kind of help that doesn't ask for recognition, doesn't demand attention, but changes everything behind the scenes. He paused, scanning the audience like he was searching for someone. This entire recital, costumes, lighting, venue, music rights, choreography support, was made possible by one generous, humble individual who never asked to be thanked. But tonight, I'm going to thank her anyway. Joel turned slowly toward me. Myra and Celeste both looked over in confusion. Delphine narrowed her eyes. The principal smiled, lifted the card slightly, and said, please join me in giving a round of applause to Irene Maddox. It was like time froze. I didn't move at first. I felt the spotlight before I saw it. A slow, warm circle of light slid over the audience and landed on me like it had been waiting there the whole time. Joel's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Delphine's face went pale. I stood. Calm. Composed. My hands didn't shake. The audience clapped. Loudly. The same people who'd ignored me when I came in were now turning toward me with genuine smiles. A woman behind me whispered, oh wow, that's her, like I was something rare and precious. And maybe, for once, I let myself feel like I was. The applause lasted longer than I expected. I didn't wave. I didn't bow. I just nodded, a small nod of acknowledgement, and sat back down without looking at Joel or his family. Celeste looked like she'd been slapped. Myra muttered something about attention-seeking, but even she didn't sound convinced anymore. Joel leaned in, whispering, you didn't tell me you did that. I didn't respond. I just kept looking forward. If I had looked at him, I knew I'd either laugh or cry, and I didn't want to do either of those things in front of his family. The lights dimmed again as the principal stepped off stage and the final bows began. Dancers lined up, parents cheered. The room was electric. But around me, it was dead silent. No more whispers. No more smug grins. Just silence. And me, in the center of it. After the performance, the lobby buzzed with energy. Parents congratulated their kids, siblings ran around clutching programs, and teachers shook hands with donors and volunteers. I stayed near the edge of the crowd, watching quietly. Joel stood beside me, awkwardly. "You really pulled that off," he said, trying to smile. "I mean, I can't believe it." I turned toward him slowly. "Believe it?" He opened his mouth like he wanted to say more. But then his phone buzzed and his attention shifted, like always. Just then, Sienna came running down the hall, her hair still pinned up and her cheeks flushed from dancing. She spotted me before she saw her own mom. "Aunt Irene," she shouted, launching herself into a hug. I knelt down to hug her. "You were amazing." "You helped with the show?" she asked, pulling back with big, curious eyes. "The principal said your name." I smiled. "I just helped a little behind the scenes." "You helped a lot," she said, hugging me again. Celeste appeared behind her, stiff and expressionless. "Sienna, come on. We're taking photos." Sienna turned back to her mom but whispered to me, "You're cooler than I thought." I laughed. "Don't tell your mom that." Celeste shot me a look like she'd swallowed a lemon. I didn't care. As they walked away, Joel turned back to me. "Why didn't you tell me you did all that?" I looked at him, for real this time. "Because it wouldn't have mattered." He blinked. "What do you mean?" I paused for a moment. Then I said it. "You never stood up for me, Joel. Not once. Tonight wasn't about the recital. It was about not needing you to anymore." I watched the words land on him like bricks. Heavy. Undeniable. Before he could respond, Delphine joined us. Her face was tight with fake politeness. "That was quite the surprise, Irene." "I suppose I owe you, thanks." I tilted my head. "You don't owe me anything, Delphine. But you owe your granddaughter a little more respect for the people she loves." Her lips thinned. She opened her mouth, but I was already walking away. I didn't feel victorious. Not really. I felt clear. Like I'd spent a decade trying to breathe through a straw and finally stepped into fresh air. As I walked toward the exit, I heard the chatter, the praise, the buzz of people still digesting the principal's speech. But I didn't stop. Not yet. I had more walking to do. Outside the theater, the air was cooler than I remembered. A soft wind rolled down from the Blue Ridge Mountains and curled around the buildings like it was brushing away the night's tension. People milled about under the marquee, parents with cameras, kids with scuffed ballet shoes, and teachers hugging each other goodbye. I stood off to the side near the stone planter by the front steps, watching them all without really being part of it. I didn't want to drive just yet. I needed to sit with the quiet for a moment. Joel followed me out but didn't say anything. He stood a few feet away like he wasn't sure whether to come closer or wait for me to speak. Classic Joel, always waiting for me to make the move, to soothe things, to fix what he wouldn't confront. After a long pause, he cleared his throat. "You could have told me," he said again, like that single statement would bridge everything. I turned to him, arms crossed, leaning back against the cold stone. "Would it have made a difference?" He shifted. "Of course. I mean, it's a big deal." "That's not what I meant." He looked at me like he didn't understand. Maybe he didn't. "You sat there tonight," I said, quietly. "And listened to them tear me apart again. Like they've done for years. And you said nothing." Again. Joel opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked down at the ground, as if he could find his defense written in the cracks of the sidewalk. "I didn't want to make a scene," he said after a moment. I laughed. It came out sharper than I intended. "No, Joel. You didn't want to be uncomfortable." He flinched. "You've always been more afraid of upsetting them than protecting me," I added. And tonight, I finally saw it for what it is. It's not about keeping the peace. It's about keeping your place with them. Even if it means letting them humiliate your wife. He was silent. Behind us, Delphine, Celeste, and Myra exited the theater. I saw them out of the corner of my eye, walking in that tight little triangle they always formed, like wolves in designer coats. Celeste had her arm around Sienna's shoulder. Myra had her phone out, whispering something to Delphine while side-eyeing me. They paused just at the curb. Celeste turned, saw us, and said loudly, "You coming, Joel?" He didn't answer. Just looked between me and them. "I'm going to my hotel," I said, pushing off from the wall. Alone. Joel took a step toward me. We drove together. "I'll take an Uber." "Irene," I shook my head. "Don't." There was a pause. A heavy, stretching pause. Then, quietly, he said, "You really didn't need to make a spectacle." My heart stopped. And then, somehow, it kept going. A spectacle. That's what he thought this was. Not grace. Not generosity. Not quiet endurance finally being acknowledged. Just another inconvenience to his family's carefully managed image. I turned fully to him. "I didn't make a spectacle, Joel. I made a difference. Something none of you ever thanked me for." He looked stunned, like he couldn't believe I was finally saying these things out loud. "Good night," I said, and started walking. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see whether he stayed or followed them. I already knew the answer. Back at the hotel, I kicked off my shoes and dropped my phone on the nightstand. I didn't check the texts. I didn't care if Joel had messaged or if his sisters were spinning a new version of the story in the family group chat. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the silence settle around me. Not the uncomfortable kind. The peaceful kind. The kind that comes after you finally stop pretending things are okay. I pulled out the program from my purse. The glossy cover had Sienna's name on the third line. Solo, under the stars. I smiled to myself. She'd really been beautiful tonight. And I was proud of her. Proud of what I'd done to make that happen. Not just because I funded it, but because I finally stood up for myself in the process. Not with a scream. Not with a scene. But with a single, blinding spotlight. The next morning, I woke up to 8 missed calls from Joel. 2 voicemails from Delphine. 1 long text from Celeste that started with, "You really embarrassed the family last night," and ended with, "I don't know what you were trying to prove." I didn't reply. I got dressed slowly, made a cup of coffee from the tiny machine in the corner of the room, and watched the light change over the hills. Asheville mornings had a way of peeling back layers. Something about the air. The way it smelled like pine and new beginnings. I had a mid-morning meeting scheduled with the school principal. We were finalizing the next round of funding, and he wanted to talk long-term impact. He didn't just see me as the donor, he saw me as a partner. A professional. A person of value. That meeting, in contrast to everything the night before, reminded me who I actually was. Afterward, I stepped outside the school, turned my face toward the sun, and took a long breath. I wasn't done yet. Not with this story. Not with my future. And definitely not with the reckoning that was coming. I was just getting started. Back at home, the silence between Joel and me grew thick enough to suffocate. For days, he floated around the house like a ghost, waiting for things to return to normal. He didn't yell. He didn't demand. He just waited. Like always. Like I would come to him and smooth it all over. But this time, I didn't. And I think that scared him more than anything I could have said. I kept busy. I met with the school's arts coordinator twice that month. We planned a summer mentorship program where older students would teach younger ones. I quietly pushed for diversity in enrollment, making sure underprivileged kids could access classes without worrying about costs. I stayed in my lane, my work, my world. Joel didn't ask about it. Not once. One evening in late April, we sat at the dinner table, and he finally said it. Are you going to keep punishing me? I blinked. You think this is punishment? He shifted in his chair. You haven't spoken to my family. You're gone every weekend. You barely look at me. I feel like I don't even live here. I set my fork down. Joel, I said calmly, your family called me a disgrace in public. You didn't say a word. I paid for your niece's recital, and instead of being proud, you accused me of making a spectacle. I've spent over a decade shrinking myself to fit into your life. Now that I've stopped doing that, it feels like punishment to you. He opened his mouth, then stopped. What do you want me to say? He asked, almost in a whisper. I smiled, but not kindly. It's not about what you say, Joel. It's about what you've already shown me. That night, I made a decision. I waited until he went to bed. Then I sat at the dining table, opened my laptop, and began typing up a new file, notice of separation. No drama. No screaming. Just clarity. I printed it the next morning, placed it in a folder, and slid it across the table during breakfast. Joel stared at it like it was radioactive. What's this? Fair terms, I said. I'm not angry, Joel. I'm just done. But, you're my wife. No, I said gently, I've been your shield. Not your partner. He didn't follow me as I walked out the door. The weeks that followed were strange, but not difficult. Joel didn't fight the paperwork. He didn't ask me to stay. He seemed stunned, like he was still trying to process that the person he'd always assumed would wait, didn't. I moved out into a small rental home in North Asheville. Nothing fancy, but quiet. Bright. Mine. Delphine sent a 2-sentence text that said, "We're all shocked by your decision. But it's probably for the best." I didn't reply. The satisfying part of this story, though, didn't come from the divorce papers or the quiet departure. It came 3 months later. The school was preparing its end-of-year gala fundraiser. The principal asked if I would be their keynote speaker, not just as a donor, but as a local leader in nonprofit support and youth advocacy. I agreed. It was a formal dinner, held at a historic venue downtown with glass chandeliers and white linens. I wore a deep forest green dress with simple heels. No flash. No designer labels. Just confidence. Halfway through the evening, while I stood by the refreshment table talking to a board member, I heard that unmistakable voice behind me. Oh. You're here. I turned. Delphine. Myra was with her, wearing something with far too many sparkles. Celeste stood off to the side, pretending to look at the artwork on the wall. Apparently, Sienna had gotten involved in the school's summer arts program, and the family was invited as guests. Of course. Delphine looked me over like she was trying to find something to criticize. I assume you're still involved in all of this, she said, gesturing vaguely around the room. I smiled. I am. In fact, they're naming the Youth Arts Scholarship after me tonight. Delphine's mouth twitched. Oh, and I'm speaking soon. You might want to grab a seat. Before she could respond, Mr. Banning appeared at my side. Irene. So glad I found you. We're ready for your speech. He offered me his arm. I turned back to Delphine and said, very politely, enjoy the program. Then I walked away. My speech was simple. I talked about the importance of community, of funding programs that give kids a chance to express themselves. I told the story of a little girl who once danced like the stars lived under her feet, and how that night reminded me what strength really looks like. The applause was warm, respectful, even emotional. When I stepped off the stage, I passed Joel in the back row. He was sitting alone. I didn't stop. 2 weeks later, I got a card in the mail. It was from Sienna. A hand-drawn picture of her in a tutu, standing on a stage, tulips in her arms. Underneath, in crooked handwriting, it read, "Thank you for giving me a place to dance. I held it in my hands for a long time. This was the closure. Not the ruined faces of the women who tried to break me. Not Joel's lonely chair at the back of the room. I found my voice. And no one could silence it again.